California, also known as the Golden State. Land of endless sun, endless opportunity, and endless shadow. It's easy to be dazzled by its surface, I know. The cliffs of the Big Sur, the shimmer of Los Angeles, the promise of reinvention. But every paradise has its hauntings, and in California, the ghosts wear many faces. This episode, we'll journey from the damp, mist-covered woods of the north to a once glamorous Hollywood hotel with secrets stitched into velvet curtains, to a quiet Modesto creek where something waits beneath the water. These aren't just ghost stories. They're echoes of loss, of fear, and of something that refuses to fade. So dim the lights, settle in, and remember, not all that glitter is gold. I'm Drifter Voyages, and this is the 50th Room Podcast. Fortuna, California, a small town on the northern edge of Humboldt County. To most, it's just a name, the kind of place you pass through without thinking, a stretch of forest and fog between here and somewhere else. But in the dense wilds of Northern California, places like Fortuna hide things. They gather stories like moss collects on redwood bark, quietly, stubbornly even, over time. Because out here, the forest isn't just background. It listens, it remembers, and according to some people, sometimes, it watches. There is a road that runs along the edge of Fortuna, Ridgewood Road. If you looked it up, you wouldn't find much, just a narrow stretch, half forgotten by the county, winding between cabins and brambles. It's the kind of road that disappears into the trees the moment you take your eyes off it. In the fall of 1998, Glenn and Mary Bell moved into a small cabin near the end of that road. Glenn had been a forest ranger, the kind of man who could read a trail like a map. And Mary, she was a writer of children's books. They were tired of traffic, the noise, and schedules. What they wanted was peace, and what they found was something else entirely. Now, before we continue the Bell's story, I want to dive into some of the history here. The forests of Northern California are vast, older than memory, older, in fact, than names. And they have a history of making things and people disappear. In the early 1980s, logging crews in the Trinity Alps reported losing entire hours, as if time itself had slipped sideways. In 1992, a hiker vanished near Willow Creek. His fire was still burning, and his shoes, not on his feet, were still warm. And in some places, search and rescue dogs will refuse to track. Standing stiff, tails low, ears pinned, as if something unseen has stepped onto the trail ahead of them. Among the Yurok and Wyandotte, the first people to walk this land, there are old stories. Stories about beings that live in the forest, not quite animal, and not quite spirit. They call them watchers. They don't speak, they don't chase, they just observe. For some, they are protectors, guardians of a sacred land. For others, they are something darker. Predators that hunt with silence, that collect names, and don't like being seen. Now that we've dove into some of the history behind this area, let's go back to the Bell's story. At first, it was small things. Mary described a feeling of pressure, like someone standing behind her while she was weeding the garden. There was no one there, but the feeling stayed. Then, at night, came the noises. The snap of twigs always just past the edge of the porch light. The shape of something moving behind the blackberry vines in the dark. And then, the whistle. 3 notes, always the same. Sharp, precise, almost musical, but somehow wrong. Like a tune, hummed by someone who's forgotten how it ends. The sounds of the whistle never came too close, but they also were never too far away. One morning, after a night of broken sleep, Glenn found footprints at the edge of the yard. They were bare, no shoe treads, no pattern. Wide, human-shaped, but also not quite right. The toes were longer, almost grasping, and the depth of the print suggested weight, a lot of it. And there were no other marks, no trail in, no trail out. Just the prints, and the unshakable feeling that something had been standing still, watching the house all through the night. Now Glenn, he was not an alarmist. He had spent days lost in the Bitterroot Range without panic. He knew the woods, and he knew what belonged in them. That night, he took his pistol and a flashlight, and decided he was going to sit on the porch all night, waiting. At 2:17 a.m., the whistle came again. 3 notes, then silence, and then movement. It was fast, low, not a deer, not a coyote. He raised the flashlight and caught a glimpse. What Glenn described, he only did once and never spoke about it again. He didn't fire. Glenn didn't move. And by sunrise, he was done. 2 days later, the Bells packed what they could fit in their truck. The pantry was still stocked with food. The mail left on the table, some opened and some still closed. And they locked the door and never came back. Today, the house stands empty, its porch overtaken by vines, the steps soft with rot, and locals are now known to call it the Whistler's Place. What Glenn and Mary saw, or believed they saw, wasn't unique. From the mist-heavy hills of Oregon to the rain-soaked forests of Washington, there are other stories. People hear 3 identical notes always at night. They find footprints that don't lead anywhere. They glimpse something tall and pale moving just behind the trees, too fast and too quiet. Some say it's one being, others believe it's many. But all the stories end the same. Once you hear the whistle, you are no longer alone. Some believe the whistler is a guardian, a spirit protecting something sacred. Others say it marks people, choosing who belongs and who doesn't. But if there's one thing everyone agrees on, it's this. If you hear those 3 notes in the dark, don't look, don't speak. Just turn around and leave as fast as you can. Some places are meant to be left alone.
Golden sun sinks into black. Shadows stretch where angels lack. Neon bleeds on empty streets where silence walks.
The forest doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers, and sometimes it just watches. But not all hauntings dwell in the wild. Some wear pearls, perfume, and lipstick. Some sing lullabies in the dark, long after the curtain falls.
Frozen and pale, ghosts of the dreamers who didn't prevail. Every wave that hits the shore carries screams from 44. Buried bones beneath the lights. California never sleeps at night.
Hollywood, a place where light is currency, where image is everything, and illusion is king. But for all the stories of success and stardom, there's another story hiding in its shadows. The kind written not in the headlines, but in whispers. Where the spotlights don't reach. Where names are forgotten, and where some dreams, once broken, still echo. Tucked just off the boulevard, behind what's now a tangle of neon signs and high-end boutiques, stands one of those places. A building that once defined glamour. The Hollywood Hotel. Before the Roosevelts, before the Walk of Fame, before the glitz turned garish, This was where the stars gathered. I'm sure you can picture it. Gold-rimmed elevators, sweeping staircases, and velvet lounges that hosted the silver screen elite. But like so many stars of that early era, the hotel faded. And some say it was never really ready to let go. In the summer of 2004, a woman named Elise Jennings checked into room 928. She was a middle school teacher from Eugene, Oregon. She came to write a personal retreat 1 week in the city of stories. Elise had always loved old movies. She liked the feel of history, the quiet glamour, the faded charm of places where the walls remember things. And the Hollywood Hotel was perfect. Quiet, a little worn, but full of character. She checked in on a Tuesday, and by Friday, she was gone. No police report, no emergency. She simply packed in the dead of night and left. And the story she came to write, the one she had started in room 928, was never finished. Now, we will get back to Elise's story in a moment. Here's some historical context for room 928 and the Hollywood Hotel. Room 928 had a reputation long before Elise stepped through its doors. In the early 1930s, it had belonged to a young silent film actress named Lillian Hart. Lillian was a kind of beautiful that didn't need lighting, with the kind of sorrow behind her eyes that directors loved. But Lillian was more than just a pretty face. She wrote poetry, composed short pieces for piano. She was smart, and for a time, respected. But talent has never been guaranteed in Hollywood. And in 1932, just days after a screen test that could have defined her career, she was found dead in that same room, room 928. The coroner listed the cause as an overdose, but whispers always said otherwise. Lillian had been seen arguing with a well-known director at a party the week before. The story went that she had been promised a part, and then, like so many others back then, was betrayed, cut from the film, and her reputation quietly soured. When they found her body, there were details that didn't add up. Her lipstick was flawless, her dress still pristine, not a wrinkle in sight. And the air was thick with the scent of rose water, her signature perfume. And that rose water fragrance, some said, lingered for weeks, even after the room was scrubbed clean. They buried Lillian quietly, but some say she never checked out of room 928. Now back to Elise. Her first night was quiet, until just past 1 a.m. Elise curled up with a notebook and tea, and heard something in the hallway. A voice, but not words. It was a humming. Soft, low, old. Elise stepped out into the hall. No footsteps, no cleaning staff, and no other guest could be seen. Elise stood there for a moment, unsure what to think of it. Then, she returned to her room. But something had changed. Elise later described the room as feeling off. Too still, and the air was too heavy. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror looked slightly wrong. Not in shape, but in space. The corners of the room were darker than they should have been. And just as she turned to leave the mirror, she saw it. A woman, standing behind her. Black dress, pale skin, eyes closed, lips painted dark, half shrouded in shadow. When Elise turned around, there was nothing there, just the scent of an old perfume. The next night, the humming returned, but this time, so did the scent. Roses at first, and then something else. Rot. The cloying sweetness of flowers sealed too long in a box. She woke at 2:14 a.m. gasping. There was a weight on her chest, as though someone was sitting on her, pressing down. Elise switched on the lamp and found 3 thin red scratches across her collarbone. delicate, even, and deliberate. And by dawn, Elise was gone. Weeks later, Elise posted her story on a paranormal message board. She did not mention the hotel by name, just the floor, the room number, the humming, and the perfume. A user reached out privately. He had heard of room 928 and of Lillian Hart. He sent Elise a scan of an old news clipping, yellowed and faded. There was Lillian's name, the cause of death, and a detail that chilled Elise to her core. 3 superficial scratches were found across the chest. Source unknown. Room 928 is still there, mostly closed to the public now. Staff say it's used for storage, though sometimes it's booked by accident. A clerical error, a system glitch. Guests who stay on the 9th floor report the smell of roses in the hallway at night. A few have heard humming just outside their door around 1 a.m. And the mirror just outside room 928, some say it doesn't always reflect what's in front of it. Sometimes it shows what's behind you. One longtime housekeeper, 22 years on the job, once told an investigator, "When she's near, you know. You don't have to see her. The air changes. It holds its breath, and so do you." Some say Lillian was forgotten by Hollywood, that she never made it. But maybe that's not quite true. Maybe she's still waiting, somewhere between spotlight and shadow. A final scene never filmed. A final song, still humming in the dark. They say room 928 still carries her story, and if you listen closely after midnight, you might hear the melody she left behind.
Oh, California, you wear your mask so well, but your golden heart is wishing well to hell.
We chase fame, but some who reach it are swallowed by it. Now we travel inland to a quieter place, a place where water remembers, where grief settles in the soil, and where the dead drip.
La Llorona weeps in Venice tides, a shadow stalks the canyon side. Sirens sing on blood-soaked coasts, calling back their wayward ghosts.
Just outside Modesto, California, there's a trail, narrow, mostly forgotten, that threads between neighborhoods and open lots. It follows a natural waterway called Dry Creek, though the name doesn't always hold true. In the daylight, the trail is peaceful. Cottonwood trees lean gently over the water. Families jog past with strollers and dogs. And you'll see kids ride bikes over wooden footbridges. But at night, something changes. The silence deepens. The air feels close. And sometimes, the water seems to carry more than just current. Because there's a story out here. A quiet one. About a woman who walks the creek. A woman full of water. In August of 2009, a teenager named Marcus Gutierrez left his house after a fight with his father. He lived on the edge of town, his backyard backing up to Dry Creek itself. The trail had always been his escape. That night was hot, humid, not a breeze to be felt. The air was thick, and the trees unnaturally still. As he neared the bend by the footbridge, he saw someone, or something, crouched in the creek bed. A woman. She was half submerged in the mud. Her long black hair clung to her face in wet ropes. Her white gown was soaked, dragging in the water and the mud. She didn't look up, just rocked gently, hands sunk into the stream as though searching for something just beneath the surface. Marcus thought she needed help, so he called out, and there was no answer. Then she stood, quickly, too quickly. Her face was pale, bloated. Her eyes were deep hollows, rimmed in shadow. Her mouth hung slack, water trickling from the corners as if it had nowhere else to go. And so, Marcus ran. Didn't stop until the door was shut and locked behind him. But that night wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Now we'll get back to Marcus's story in a moment. I want to give you some backstory about the legend tied to Dry Creek. The legend dates back to the fall of 1986. A woman named Christina Yabera lived just a few blocks from where Marcus had seen the figure. She was a 28-year-old single mother, quiet, hardworking, and by all accounts, deeply devoted to her infant daughter. After a long and bitter custody battle, the state took the child. There were accusations, but nothing was ever proven. But that didn't matter. The court made its decision, and Christina never recovered. Neighbors said they saw her walking the trail afterwards, alone, silent, clutching a photograph. Sometimes crying, sometimes just staring at the water, as if waiting for it to speak. On a gray October morning, Christina vanished. Search teams combed the creek for 2 days, and sadly, they found her beneath the 12th Street Bridge, face down, soaked and unmoving, still clutching the photograph. The baby, they said, had already been placed in a foster home. A new name, a new life, far from the woman who never stopped looking. And that's where the story begins. And now, let's head back to Marcus's story. When Marcus told his family what he had seen, his younger sister went pale. She had seen the same woman standing at the edge of their backyard, soaked, silent, staring towards the house. Since then, other stories have surfaced, quiet accounts, uneasy memories. A delivery driver navigating the neighborhood at dusk swore he passed a barefoot woman walking along the shoulder. When he stopped to check on her, she was gone. A jogger reported seeing a woman in white step out of the creek, only to vanish when he turned around. Even a retired detective, one who had worked the Yabera case in the 80s, told a local paper that he woke one morning to find wet footprints on his porch. No rain, no sprinkler, just the prints, one set, leading to his door, and nowhere else. Each of these stories share the same subtle marks. A scent of river water in place where no water flows. Whispers, indistinct, always behind you. And a dripping sound, slow and unnatural, even in sealed rooms. And always, the sense that someone is searching, not for you exactly, but through you. Folklore rarely exists in isolation. Across cultures and continents, we find stories of women lost to sorrow, and water, it seems, is their chosen medium. In Latin America, there's the La Llorona, the weeping woman cursed to wander rivers and lakes, crying for the children she drowned. Even in native Californian traditions, stories persist of women who rise from the water during years of drought, grieving for what the earth took from them. Christina Yabera's story, if that's who the woman truly is, fits a pattern older than the town itself. A mother taken from her child, a loss too deep to settle, and a grief that saturates the soil until it breathes. They say, if you hear water where there shouldn't be any, if the frogs go silent, if the trail suddenly feels colder, don't look back. Don't answer the voices that sound like your own. Don't follow the wet footprints. Because the creek doesn't forget, and neither does she. She's still walking, still grieving, still dripping.
Hear the house through desert stone, empty mansions left alone. History's a blade so sharp, every paradise has its dawn.
And there you have it. 3 supposedly true tales from the Golden State of California. From redwood forests to hotel corridors to moonlit creeks, the Golden State glows bright, but its shadows stretch long. California is built on dreams, but dreams can rot, and ghosts, they don't fade with the sun. Thank you for listening to this episode of the 50th Room Podcast. If these stories moved you, then please rate the show. Leave a review. That helps more than you know. And if you have tales of your own, send them in. I love reading your stories. Don't forget to follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Until next time, stay cautious, stay curious, and remember, keep your lights low, your steps soft, and your eyes forward. The shadows are closer than you think.
Okay.